This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, Gemara Rabbi Glatstein, Agun Chodesh Felchen Chanukah. So last night we had a Chanukah party in Brooklyn. We got back. What time we got back? 1:15. So Baruch Hashem, I was up very, very late. But I wanted to get the share out because we learned yesterday that today is the yahrzeit, possibly, of Meir Bal Haness, and it's brought down in the Ben Ish Chai and in the Kaf HaChaim and Reb Chaim Falaji that one should light a candle, Ilui Nishmas for Meir Bal Haness. Somebody even sent me a picture, that guy in the shul sent me a picture of his candle. Okay, very nice. So, we mentioned a number of times already that there is a particular connection between Reb Meir and the Yom Tov of Chanukah, based on the Gemara in the first Maramakim is the Gemara in Avodah Zarah on Daf Yud Ches Amud Beis. In fact, last night on Reb Meir's yahrzeit, Rabbi Dov Lokich called me from Detroit. He's Bez Hashem coming to the Chanukah Sabayis, and he said that somebody told him over this Marsha in the Gemara, and after he heard the Marsha, he's like, this Marsha is right up Glatstein's alley. So he went to check, and he says, sure enough, you gave 3 Shiurim on this Marsha. But so I said, it's a good thing you're calling me tonight, because tonight's Reb Meir's yahrzeit. He'd really appreciate it. Anyway, the Gemara says like this, a very interesting Gemara. The Gemara says, Bruria was the wife of Reb Meir, and her sister was kidnapped and taken to a brothel, a Kuba Shel Zoynos, a house of harlotry.
Which Gemara is it?
It's Avodah Zarah, Yud Ches Amud Beis. I forgot to put it on. And Reb Meir went to rescue her. And Reb Meir wasn't sure whether she remained tahar or not, so he wanted to test her, so he said, Hashmioli. He made an advance to her to see if she would go for it, to see if she was still a tzaddikas. And she said, no, I'm tameh. So Reb Meir said, I'll wait for you. So she said, no, there's much better merchandise here. You don't need me. So anyway, Reb Meir realized she was tahar, and therefore she wanted to get her out. So he tells the jail warden, give her to me. So the jail warden says, I'm afraid of the malchus. So he said, here, take this money. Half of it, for the government, and half will be for you. And the guy said, what do I do if I get in trouble? So Meir said, just say Elaka de Meir Aneini, and you're going to be saved. So the guy said, how do you know Elaka de Meir Aneini works? So Meir took a clod of earth, he threw it at man-eating dogs, and they started attacking him. Bari never throw dirt at man-eating dogs, and they started to attack him, and the guy said, Meir said, Elaka de Meir Aneini, and it worked. So the guy said, it must work. He used it, and Meir was, persona non grata, and they carved his image on the gateways of Rome, and Meir ran away to Bavel, and some say he went away to Bavel because his wife committed suicide, but be it as it may, this is the tefillah of Meir, Elaka de Meir Aneini. Okay, so the Marsha asks, we discussed this, and Marsha's question is, we know HaKadosh Baruch Hu does not associate his name with tzaddikim while they are still alive, like it says, Elakei Abraham and Pachad Yitzchak. So how does Reb Meir have a right to associate God's name with him? So I once saw somebody wanted to say, God doesn't associate his name with the living tzaddikim, but the living tzaddik has the right to associate God with him. Okay, but Pashtus Marsha is a good kasha, because the reason God does not associate with the tzaddikim while they're still alive is because you never know. Like Rabbi Yochanan Kohen Gadol, he served the Kahuna Gedola for 80 years and then he went off. So Hashem is never guaranteed that somebody will remain on the straight and the narrow. So how could Reb Meir say, Elaka de Meir Aneini? So the Marsha says 2 wondrous pshatim. V'yesh loymar, D'loi amar Elaka de Meir, rak l'simen ba'alma al shemai. It was only a siman for his name. V'loi niskavein kol ikar al shemai, rak niskavein Elaka de Meir la'aretz v'adarm aleha hu yaninu. What Reb Meir meant was not the God of Meir, the person Meir. He meant the God who illuminates the world. He should answer us. That's the first pshat. The second pshat is the pshat we're going to focus on. Oisha Amar Elaka de Meir Lanu b'Malchus Yavan. God who illuminated our eyes in the kingdom of Yavan, Hakodemes, of the previous Galus, B'neis Haneros Shel Chanukah, and the miracle of the candles of Chanukah. Now we know the Medrash says that one of the decrees of the Greeks was we had to write on the horn of a shar that we have no chelek in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the lashon of the Medrash is they darkened our eyes with this gezerah. So God, you illuminated our eyes in the times of Yavan. Please you bailed us out in the times of Yavan. Bail us out again. Now the Marsha quotes a piyut. If the Marsha is quoting a piyut, you could be sure that this is a piyut that was a very early piyut, obviously earlier than the Marsha. So there's an interesting piyut he quotes, Umi ya'ir l'cha meir v'ata neiri Hashem. So the Marsha is just bringing a proof that in the times of Chanukah, it was as though God illuminated our lives, and therefore Rabbi Meir was always tapping into the miracle of Chanukah. Elaka de Meir Aneini. God who illuminated our lives in the time of Chanukah, He should answer us and save us. Okay, that's the Gemara in Avodah Zarah with the comments of the Marsha. Surprisingly, comes Rabbi Akiva Eiger in the Golyan Hashas. And the Rabbi Akiva Eiger in the Golyan Hashas quotes a remarkable maramaka, somewhat uncharacteristic of Rabbi Akiva Eiger. We know Rabbi Akiva Eiger certainly knew Kala Torah Kula, but in his comments in the Golyan Hashas, he would typically quote a rare Shas Tshuva Sefer, or he would refer to Taisus, Ayin Taisus. Here he says, Ayin Mashakasav Harama V'Maimer Chikar Hadin Soif Chelek Aleph. Now, who's the Ramah that the Rabbi Akiva Eiger is referring to? Here he spells Rama with an ayin. He's referring to the Rama Mipano, one of the great all-time Mekubalim of Italy, the Menachem Azaria of Pano. And Rabbi Akiva Eiger is saying, look over there, and he doesn't say why we should look over there. He doesn't say what the question. Whenever Rabbi Akiva Eiger says look somewhere, there's a question, and that he's presuming you would be bothered by a question, and he's saying, if you want to know the answer, look in such and such place. So what exactly is the question here? It seems the question is as follows, and that is, this tefillah, Elaka de Meir Aneini, it's not some, hocus pocus. There must be some deep kavanah to it. And when Reb Meir said the tefillah, he must have had very lofty kavanos, and that explained the efficacy of the tefillah. Now the jail warden, when he said the tefillah, probably was clueless as to what those kavanos were. So the question is, so why did the tefillah work for the jail warden? In other words, this tefillah is not like some magic. Say, Elaka de Meir Aneini, and all of a sudden, all the doors open. Reb Meir probably had a certain level of devekos, a certain connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He knew the soidos of these words, but the jail warden was completely unaware. So how did it work? So the Rama Mipano says as follows. It's not so easy to understand what he means. But the Chida explains what he means. He says like this: V'hu ketam ashrei yoshvei veisecha, ashrei adam oiz leibach mesilois leilokeinu. Hine yoshvei veisecha loinemar. It doesn't say those who sit in your house. Ela beisecha, ki hem atzmam heichal v'kisei Hashem. Kedachsev zeh keli v'anveu eya loy nove lahashlamas hadugma l'chavayd shchina. It doesn't say Ashrei Yoshvei Biveisecha, but Ashrei Yoshvei Beisecha, that the tzaddikim are literally the bias of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Maksiv Bei Yizamercha Chavoid V'lo Yidaim. Af Hema B'tzidkasam Oid Yihalelucha Sela. Ashrei Adam Oiz Loibach Gam Hu Yivusar B'minei Ha'oisher. V'yois B'Hashem Miftacha Yafal Pishla Yizka Liyos Hu Atzmei Merkava. Rak mesilois uzay ubetchaynai bovavam shal yoshvei beisecha. And then the Rama Mipano ends off, Hu al derech elaka de Meir Aneini asher lo yada lechavein yoser mizeh hashir. So the simple words are inexplicable. What in the world is Rama Mipano saying? And why is Rabbi Akiva Eiger saying, look there? So the Chida gives some explanation. He says, from this Gemara in Avodah Zarah and Daf Yud Chesam Beis, Nishtarbev HaMinhag, the minhag developed that in all Jewish locales, that for any tzara shalei tavai, that for any tragedy that it not fall, meaning whenever somebody's in a bind, what tefillah do they say? Elaka. Now look at the lashon lechida, de Rabbi Meir Aneini, and they are menader shemen, and they're menader tzedaka lenishmas Meir Haness. Says lechida, look in the Rama Mipano, that the kavana of, when one says the tefillah, Kad Meir Aneini, is you should be mechavein that whatever Reb Meir had in mind when he said that tefillah, that these words should contain. That's the chiddush of the Ramami Pano that Rabbi Akiva Eiger is referring to. Because what Rabbi Akiva Eiger is bothered by is that the tefillah Reb Meir was a unique tefillah because he said it with his kavanos and his understanding, but nobody else knows what Reb Meir had in mind. So what Rabbi Akiva Eiger is saying, look at the Ramami Pano, but the Ramami Pano is mechadesh, that the efficacy of Elaka Meir Aneini is such that you should be mechavein. I don't know exactly what Elaka Meir Aneini does, but whatever Reb Meir had in mind, I want these words to also do. I'm having in mind whatever Reb Meir had in mind. So you say it's ridiculous, but you don't know what he had in mind. So the chiddush of the Ramami Pano that Rabbi Akiva Eiger is citing is that a person could sort of tap into somebody else's mitzvah or tefillah, that this gadol said these words and had these kavanas. I'm saying these words with whatever kavana Reb Meir had. The Chida quotes the Ramami Pano, and he concludes, "Mikana talamed shena ma shenoagu loymar shemachavnen betfila ladas rajbi ukayoytze v'chein b'toira u'v'mitzvahs minog toiv." Meaning, there's a concept you sometimes see in tefillos and bakashos that I'm having in mind what the great tzaddikim had in mind, but you're not. If you need to say that, then obviously you're not having that in mind. So, but we learn from here that you could do such a thing. You could say that I'm doing X, Y, and Z, and I'm being mechavein to the kavanos of the great tzaddikim, and whatever their kavana was, I want to have it, even though I have no idea what it was. This is the makar from the Ramami Pano, and it's cited by Rabbi Akiva Eiger that there is a legitimate basis to be able to replicate what somebody else did, even though you have absolutely no idea what they did. There's such an idea. What do you mean, Aneini?
Similar idea. Hayam haras. We're
saying we're dependent on God.
I'm saying we're saying whatever Hashem's cheshbonus are, and that Hashem understands.
Right. I guess something like that.
Wait, but we change it? How can you change it?
No, we're like blank. We have no idea what Reb Meir had in mind. Oh, Dir Reb Meir.
Yeah,
should you say Dir Reb Meir?
Okay, I'm going to get to that.
The Marshal's Kasha would come back.
Yeah. We're going to get to that. That's like a sort of a side point, but the Chida does emphasize, he sort of makes a discrepancy between our Nusach and the Gemara. The Gemara says, Elaka Meir Aneini, and then you could read Elaka Meir La'aretz V'adam L'Brachma, or Elaka Meir Lanu B'nei Chanukah, and if you say Reb Meir, now we're talking about the person. So, we'll go to that right away. The last Maramakam on the sheet, but that's not the subject I want to talk about. Just sort of as an agav point, there's a tshuva in Reb Chaim Falaji in Shalos HaTshuvos Lev Chaim. He says Chadoshem Mikarav Bo, new guys came to town. He's referring to the Chida, who want to say that when you say Elaka de Meir Aneini, you say Elaka de Reb Meir Aneini. No, but he says V'chad Havinon Pai Tzarich L'dag Dvarim Elaka de Meir. You have to say de Meir. Why? Because it's based on the Gemara Avodah Zarah. And the Gemara says, Elaka de Meir Aneini. And so says the Reb Chaim Falaji, we don't know Chachmas. You have to, if the Gemara says Elaka de Meir Aneini, you do what the Gemara says. Kasavti ki tzarich lamer dafka b'lashon hazel Elaka de Meir Aneini, Elaka de Meir Aneini beis pa'amim. Right, we said yesterday by Shalshut is dafka, the words Elaka de Meir Aneini, because the numerical value of Elaka de Meir Aneini is 472, and the Sefer Karnaim says there are 944 dogs in Chodesh Teves, so you got to do Elaka de Meir Aneini, Elaka de Meir Aneini. If you put in Rebbe, you messed up the whole thing. You got an extra 212, you got another 424. You want to bring another 424 dogs? 944 should be enough.
It doesn't equal the 1304, does it?
No. So it seems like the Reb Chaim Falaji is not in favor of saying Elaka de Rebbe Meir Aneini, but maybe we'll explain why the Chida says Rebbe. The Chida may have added Rebbe specifically because of the Ramami Pano. Because since Ramami Pano says that when one says these words, they have to have in mind what Reb Meir had in mind. So in order to emphasize that, we say Elaka de Rebbe Meir, the way Reb Meir, we don't refer to the God of Rebbe Meir, but we refer to the kavanos that Reb Meir had when he said the tefillah of Elaka de Meir Aneini. That's what the poskim.
But you're changing the tefillah.
So
you have a stronger kasha because you're changing the tefillah.
So
your kavanos are correct, but now you've changed the tefillah.
But Reb Meir himself wouldn't say Elaka de Reb Meir Aneini because he wasn't talking about himself. He wouldn't talk about himself like that.
Here,
right?
Here, look at two more things. So that's the Reb Chaim Filaji doesn't like Elaka de Reb Meir, right?
Maybe
Because
something that's connected. Either the kavanas have to be connected, or the words have to be connected. There's no
You
shyness.
think both? would need to
Yeah,
be-
but so right, the chiddush is that if you
Again,
don't have the kavana, at least you're having the
Pashtus Elaka de Meir Aneini is not going on the Tana Reb Meir like the Marsha asked. You're not allowed to say Elaka to a living person. Now, the truth is, a way around the Marsha's Kash is, but now Reb Meir is not alive anymore.
Right.
It was only Kash on Reb Meir. It was only a kasha on Meir. How could he say it? But technically, we could say it because we know Meir and did well. So we don't have a problem. Now, the only question is, you're changing the nusach hatfila. The answer is no. What we mean with this nusach is the tefillah Meir said of Elaka de Meir Aneini, and we put in Rebbe, so to lock into his kavana. That's how the Ben Ish Chai explains it. First, we'll look at number 7. The Chida wrote a whole sefer of tefillahs. If you ever, I recommend getting the sefer Avodas HaKodesh of the Chida. It's basically a Kitzur Shulchan Aruch for Sfardim, but in it he puts Yediyos Atzumais, amazing Yediyos in it. So he has in the back of it something called Kaf Achas. So in his second to last tefillah, penultimate tefillah, he says a tefillah l'refua u'l'chol davar. He says Hareini misnadev shemen lamar leila nishmas Meir Bal Haness. Kedei she'HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'schus Meir Bal Haness yatzileni li u'le'ishti mikol choyli mikol kav v'niyah briyim t'sheinu ma'anan v'shkedim v'yatzin mikol tzar mikol minei paraniyos v'yarach yameinu b'toiv v'shnoiseinu b'ne'imim la'avodas yizbarach Elaka de Rabbi Meir Aneini. Again, the Chida puts in Elaka de Rabbi Meir Aneini. So the Ben Ish Chai comments on this in Parshas Re'eh. And he says that when a person's b'tzara, you're allowed to make a neder. You're allowed to make a neder, even though usually we say better not to make a neder. You know, they ask you, could you give donate money? In general, it's better not to make a neder. But if a person's b'tzara, you're allowed to make a neder b'tzara. And some say it doesn't even need hatara, but you need to fulfill it. Meaning, what does it mean? That not that you don't need to, that you can't be matter it. A neder be'esar, someone's in a bind, and they say, Ribbon Shalom, help me out, I'm a neder $100. And then you realize, oh, if I don't have it, you cannot be matter such a neder. And then the Ben Ish Chai says, L'inyan halacha, you could be matter, l'tzarach mitzvah, l'tzarach gadol. Okay. And then he says, he quotes the Chida. He says, Af agav da'ata no'ago rabim lidar l'Reb Meir Bal Haness. It's better just to give it right away before you get the thing. In other words, let's say, Ribbon Shalom, if my team makes the playoffs, I want my team to make the playoffs, I'm going to give $100 to Tzedaka. Give it right away, even before your team makes the playoffs. Okay. Says the Ramami Panoi, that you should say Elaka de Meir Aneini v'yichavein lekavana shekivein Rameir Bal Haness b'zeh be'esh sha'amar l'sar b'zar she'yamar kein v'yinatza. Okay, here's what I want to talk about today. Very interesting idea is that, like, what in the world is this custom of giving tzedakah l'ilei nishmas Rameir Bal Haness? Well, why don't we give tzedakah l'ilei nishmas Ram Gamliel, l'ilei nishmas Rab Tarfon, l'ilei nishmas Chveis Shmaya v'Avtalyon Hillel? Why do we pick on Rameir? Like, what does tzedakah have to do with Rameir? So over the years, we've said a number of perushim, and we're going to add a few new ones. The one that we've said, we like to say over, is from the MS Liakov of Rav Yaakov Sha'alti al Ninyoy, one of the Mekubalim Kadmonim, and Rav Avadia Yosef, I believe, quotes this idea in his commentary to Pirkei Avos. And the idea is like this. We know the famous Gemara in Baba Basra. The Gemara says that Tornis Rufus asked Rabbi Akiva does God love the poor? So Rabbi Akiva says, sure. So Tornis Rufus says, if he loves them so much, why doesn't he give them food to eat? So Tornis Rufus says, giving tzedakah will obligate one to go to Gehenna. Rabbi Akiva says, why? So Tornis Rufus will give you a mashal. A king put a slave in jail. Someone sneaks in and feeds the slave. He's going to be a morid b'malchus. The king wants the slave to be in jail without being supported. You have no right to feed the slave. So, and Tornis Rufus says, you guys are avodim tashem because you're ein oisin ritzon shel makom. So Rabbi Akiva says, bad mashal. I'll give you a different mashal. The king put his son in jail, and someone sneaks in and feeds the son. What's going to happen to the person who fed the son? The king's going to reward him. It says Rabbi Akiva, we're banim ta Hashem. So Torah's Rebbe says, no, you're einois in ritzon shel makom. That's the conversation back and forth. So it comes out that according to the Shita of Rabbi Huda, that when we don't do the will of God and we're in Galus, you're not allowed to give tzedakah. Now you're not allowed to, you're going to be punished for giving tzedakah. So who could you give tzedakah according to? You could only give tzedakah according to the Shita of Rabbi Meir. So therefore we dafka give tzedakah, Lila Nishmas, Rabbi Meir Haness, because only according to Rabbi Meir is tzedakah a nice and admired and noble mitzvah. But if you hold Bizman Sheinois and Ritzon Shel Makom, we are avadim ta Hashem, you cannot give tzedakah. The Parsha's Drachim, right? Now to me it's a pella. Does Rabbi Huda really say you're not allowed to give tzedakah? I mean, it would come out, Rabbi Huda would say you're not allowed to give tzedakah. True, but he would say only pashtus. Pashtus, it's only bizman shoyis and tzana shamakim. That's what the Parsha Drachim says. Meaning the mitzvah of tzedakah would be contingent on the madrega of Klal Yisrael.
It depends how you categorize tzedakah. Only to Aniyim, the poor people.
Aniyim is only. That's not tzedakah. That's not tzedakah. Hachzakas Torah. It's not.
Amoraim and Amoraim never went around collecting tzedakah for the poor.
According to Rabbi Huda?
Yeah.
Well,
We don't have anywhere in the world Rabbi Huda giving tzedakah. It's hard to believe. Huh? Strange.
I mean, Rav Vadia writes, tzedakah only works according to Rabbi Meir. Bizman she'einois in ritzon shel makom. I would say that even Rabbi Huda agrees to Rabbi Meir that ben kach u'ben kach we are banim l'Hashem. The machlokes is, are we koroi? Do we have the label? But inherently or intrinsically, we're always banim. The question is, do we have the title? Meaning, even Rabbi Huda would be moida, you could give tzedakah, just we're not koroi banim. Okay, this is actually a mahalach we spoke about many times. So I want to tell you two interesting new mahalchim that are brought in the poskim. It's interesting. The poskim discuss why do we give tzedakah l'ilay nishmas Rabbi Meir Bal Haness. You want to give tzedakah, give tzedakah. What does Rabbi Meir got to do with it? So the Trabina Rav in Shalas Tshuvas Doivev Meisharim Chelek Daled and Likutei Tshuvas, I believe it's Oy Zayin. He says that there is a machlokes tanoim after the Gezar Din. After the Gezar Din, can a Yachid cry out and rip up a Gezar Din? In other words, everybody agrees that if there's a Gezar Din on a tzibur, the tzibur could be tsoyek and do tshuva and rip up the Gezar Din. But what about a Yachid? So first he starts off saying, he's talking about a boat. Are people on a boat, are they like Yechidim? Are they like a tzibur? But then he says, we paskin like Rav Meir, who holds that even a Yachid could rip up a Gezar Din after tshuva. Even though there are two deis in the Gemara brings an opinion that a Yachid cannot rip up a Gezar Din lachar tshuva. So says it should be a Rav, this that we cry out, Elaka de Meir Aneini, which is based on the Gemara in Avodah Zarah, it's, you know why Rabbi Meir? Because everybody else would say that if you're in a bind and there's already Gezar Din, you go home and throw in the towel. You're done. You're one and done. There's no way to be oikaret. There's no way to rip it up. It's only Rabbi Meir who holds you could rip up a Gezar Din even by a Yachid. So that's the inyan of being mispala. L'kad Meir Aneini. We're saying Yibbanisham, since we pass like Rabbi Meir that even a Yachid could be kaireya a Gezar Din, so we daven and we give tzedakah that lishitasai, you should help us. So that's also a chiddush mahalach. The Munkatcher brings in his sefer Divrei Torah, very interesting sefer. He says a few approaches. First, he quotes Rav Aaron of Stalin, who says, Rav Aaron of Karlin, that before you daven, give tzedakah to the kupa Rav Meir Bal Haness. Why? Because besides the fact that it's actually halach in Shulchan Aruch, in Shulchan Aruch it says before you daven Shemona Esrei you should give tzedakah. Now, I don't think you could actually give tzedakah right before Shemona Esrei. I don't think you'll have to be mafsik between Gal Yisrael and Shemona Esrei by giving tzedakah, let alone Berachas Kriyas. That means sometime before you daven Shemona Esrei, it's brought in Shulchan Aruch. You know what Shulchan Aruch is? That's the book that people don't really. That's the halacha thing that people are not so into. They're not the Segulah thing, like the things you have to do. That's where it says you should try to give tzedakah before you end up davening Shemona Esrei. So one of the reasons is that it's recommended that tzedakah goes to Eretz Yisrael, because since all the tefillos go through the avenue of Eretz Yisrael, this, by giving the tzedakah, he says, Sha'idei shenois in tzedakah, v'or b'nei Yerushalayim, Eretz Yisrael, Ha'idei zeh yale b'machshavtoi es tfilasoi derech artzenu ha'kedosha, like the pasuk says, v'spalo derech artzenu. It's a way of honing and navigating your tefillah derech Eretz Yisrael. And then the Munkacher says, what we said by Shalshudas yesterday, based on Rav Sham Shemesh Napoli, that in Chodesh Teves specifically, but at all times, there is called a klipa of the klavim. How many klavim are there? 944 or 1304. So when you say Elaka de Meir Aneini, Elaka de Meir Aneini, which is Gematria 944, you wipe out 944 klavim. There is a girsa in the Gemara, Elaka de Meir Aneini Aneini, Elaka de Meir Aneini Aneini, that wipes out 1304 klavim. That also, you don't want when you're davening Shemona Esrei like some kind of klipos in the heaven interfering with your tefillah. So you knock them out, by giving tzedakah nishmas or Meir Bal Haness, it removes all mastinin, mekatrigim, Mesayurim, and so forth. Okay, here's the Geshmaka answer. And it comes with a story. I'll tell you the story first. In Prague, in the 18th century, we had one of the great all-time Rabbanim, who is not so well known. He was a predecessor of Noda B'Yehuda. His name was Rav David Oppenheim, who had one of the greatest all-time libraries, which is, many of the some are still extant today. And on his deathbed, as he was like a goises, he basically said, V'dilma Rameir, and he passed away. And they really didn't know what the pshat was, V'dilma Rameir. In fact, they went many, many, many years without finding a Rav. Now this, what I'm telling you now, is brought in the official biography of the Noda B'Yehuda. And the little nuance I'm saying now is not in the official biography, but is in other biographies, that they've searched and searched for Rabbeim, but they couldn't find any, because even though they found qualified Rabbanim, they thought Rav David Oppenheim meant V'dilma Rameir, the next Rav's name has to be Meir. Until the Noda B'Yehuda applied for the job, and he said, he was the best candidate, but they said, what do we do? Rav David Oppenheim said V'dilma Rameir. And then he said what he's talking about. You know what he meant? Reb Meir Shita is that even though Roiv Goisesim Lamisa, most people who are Goises are not going to survive, Reb Meir is Choishesh Lamiyuta. So when they asked Reb David Oppenheim, who should be the next rabbi? He said, why do you want me to die already? V'dilma Reb Meir, maybe Reb Meir is right that we're Choishesh Lamiyuta and I'm going to live. Why are you asking me about my successor? Maybe I'm going to live. So they told the Noda B'Yehuda got the job by being mechadesh that pshat and Reb David Oppenheimer, when he said V'dilma Reb Meir, he didn't mean the next rabbi's name has to be Meir. He meant that why are you writing me off already? Maybe I'll live. Okay. So comes the Munkacher, and he says, I heard from Hagoyin Rav Tzvi Hersh Mizidachav. Now Rav Tzvi Hersh Mizidachav was one of the all-time great Mekubalim. He was such a great Mekubal that the Malbim was one of the greatest Rabbanim who ever lived. The Briskers say there are three Achronim that have a Kayach of a Rishain. Obviously they say Reb Chaim Brisker, and they say the Vilna Gaon, and they say the Malbim. The Beis Halevi says there are certain psukim in Tehillim that none of the Rishainim were able to explain, except for the Malbim, because the Malbim said Baruch HaKodesh. Chafetz Chaim says there's certain chidushim that only true Gedolei Yisrael could say, like the Malbim. The Malbim's Rebbe in Kabbalah was Reb Tzvi Hersh Mizidachav. That's a chidush, because the Malbim was not from the Olam HaChassidus. Reb Tzvi Hersh was from the Olam HaChassidus. But he had a title, the Sar Beis HaZoyhar, like last week's Parsha. He was the master of that. Says Reb Tzvi Hersh Mizidachav, when someone's a choila misukan, actually, when Reb Tzvi Hersh Mizidachav himself was a choila misukan, he was in Lvov, and he was about to go to the next world, and they saw he was a goises, and he says, "Quick, give tzedakah l'ilui nishmas Meir Bal Haness." They said, "What?" He said, "Yeah. Because why is a goyses b'sakana? Because roiv goyses in lamisa, but roiv chaylim l'chayim, but Meir is choishish l'miyuta. That's why he's called Meir Bal Haness. Because when you're in a jam, and it's unlikely you ever get out of it, there's only one person whose shita is, you know what? You never know what could happen. That's a shita Meir. So therefore, Meir l'shitase, who's choishish l'miyuta, that even goyses could live, so therefore we give tzedakah lil nishmasai. Why? He says, so based on this, the Munkacher says, Kigam, someone who has roiv avoinos. Let's say you have a guy who has roiv avoinos. By giving tzedakah l'nishmas Meir Haness, and you be choishish for the miyot mitzvahs I have. But that's part of the concept also. It's Meir l'shitasei, who is choishish for the miyot. So I like to say also, you lose something, it's way there's no chance you're going to find it. 99.9% it's lost for good. What are the chances that you're going to go look for it on the street and it's still going to be there? There's only one shita that says, there's actually a realistic possibility that it might be there. Reb Meir shita. It's a halachic shita. We're choishish for the miyot. So according to all the other poskim, you're never going to find your car keys again. It's only Reb Meir who holds we're choishish for the miyot. There's still a halachic likelihood that you might find it. So that's another pshat. So one pshat you give tzedakah l'nishmas Reb Meir Bal Haness, it's Reb Meir l'shitase ben kach nikram banim. So we're allowed to give tzedakah. One pshat is it's Reb Meir l'shitase that a yachid could be kairei gzar din, and a third pshat is Reb Meir l'shitase who's choishish for the miyot. One last thing, the Munkacher also brings down that the pasuk says in Mishlei, "Da'aga b'lavish yisichenu la'acherim." If you have a worry in your heart, tell it to somebody else. Literally, it's a psychological principle. You're bothered by something. A guy came over. He said, "Rabbi, I got to speak to you," and he poured out his heart. And I had no eitzah for him. And he says, "Thank you so much. I'm really grateful to you." But I didn't do anything. I didn't even say anything. Answer is that people feel better if they could unburden themselves. That's what it says in Mishlei. Da'aga b'lavish yisichenu la'acherim. But we know acherim, who is called acherim? Reb Meir is called acherim. So when you're in a bind, yisichenu la'acherim, that's the makar of calling out be'isara Elaka de Meir Aneini. We also said over recently that the Kloisenberger Rebbe once advised one of his Hasidim in the Holocaust. This Chassid writes that I asked the Rebbe for a Segulah. So the Rebbe said like this: 3 things. Number 1, wherever you go, always wear a yarmulke. Number 2, be careful in the Netilas Yadayim. And the Rebbe gave him 3 lechishais, 3 segulais, things to say. Number 1, he said, say Imei de Avraham HaMaslei Bas Karnavai, and say Yavai HaMelech v'Haman Hayoim, which is Rosh Tevas Hashem Havaya, and Elaka de Rabbi Meir Aneini, like the Chida. And he says, he gave me his hand. He says, if you do these 3 things, God will watch over you. V'chein haya. And so it was. So as we said last night by Shashus, Reb Chaim Falaji says that a Jew should always think about the great Tana Meir and his shita of ben kach nikra banim, and this tefillah of Elaka de Meir Aneini, which is brought in the Gemara and expounded on by the Ramami Pano, is that it's a very powerful tefillah that one has in mind, that whatever a mayor had in mind when he told that particular jail warden, this is what we have in mind, and the Rebbeinu Shalom should save us. Mikol Tzara Shaloi Tavai. Wishing everyone a Felach and Chanukah on this great day, which actually might be the yahrzeit of the Meir Bal Haness. Shkayach.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.